The struggle for transitional justice is never waged in perfect conditions. Issues of healing and reconciliation, they never happen in cozy conditions. It is always a continuous struggle.
There are so many people who have been hurt, even within their families, within the communities, and in our country, even at a national level, where violence has been seen sometimes to be state-sponsored. This is why the church is always concerned about those people, because the church basically is the grassroots. We are in each and every community.
The truth-seeking process is the most that affects and benefits the victims.
What is important for victims is that they are sufficiently empowered to be able to understand the infrastructure which they are trying to dismantle, which is the infrastructure of violence, and to understand the pillars of peace which they are trying to build, which is called positive peace, so that they are involved in the process from a position of power, not from a position of weakness.
One of the things that Zimbabwean survivors of conflict can learn from Uganda's quest for transitional justice is basically the fact that silence is not an option. They should learn that silence is not an option. Keeping quiet does not solve anything. Speaking out is important. People need to know what happened to them, and they should never stop talking about what happened to them.
And so it is important, say, for those who have their rights violated in any way, those who are grieved, be it at a family level, community level, or even at a national level, not just to be silent, but to come forward and seek ways, ask even for the assistance of the church so that their situation can be rectified. Because ultimately, it is important that everybody be at peace.
The fact that we learn to speak about them, we learn to confront them, we get empowered, we get relieved, and it is one step to healing.
The most important thing for victims is for their pain to be heard, to be witnessed, and to be listened to. So leaders need to be able to do that. But when you yourself are wounded or traumatized, we have this thing in psychology that we call being triggered. So when somebody says something that touches your own pain, all of a sudden your capacity to hear that person gets limited because you are now focusing on your own pain. So leaders who get triggered are leaders who are so wounded that they end up focusing on their wounds and not necessarily that of the victims.
From the experience from Kenya, what Zimbabwe can learn is that before the commission was set up, there were people who opposed it. And they said we need to leave the past and move on. But we realized that not all of us were at the same level. They were victims who were hurting and they needed to deal with their past. And so when we established the truth-seeking process and we went out to carry out statement taking from which where victims are able to share with us their violations, it's overwhelming at the number of victims that came forward. I think we had the largest number of statements taken, over 40,000 statements. This shows an overwhelming urge of victims to participate in the Kenyan truth-seeking process.
I always say to people that investing in your own well-being and healing as a leader in contexts like this is not a luxury, but it's a necessity. So to encourage leaders to invest in leadership coaching, where now and again they are able to sit down and get to know yourself, know what are the things that trigger me, what are the things about my own life history that would make it difficult for me to hear. So awareness of who you are as a leader and of your own trauma and of your own woundedness and how it could hinder you, so that there's nothing as dangerous as a leader who's asleep to himself, who has no clue that he's blocking people, he's not listening, and that actually his pain that is doing that.
I remember in one of the areas in Garissa, most of the women who participated in the process came from Wajir, where a massacre had taken place. In fact, these women had migrated to Garissa in the mid 80s, just not to remember what happened to them, to close over what happened to them. But immediately we conducted the hearings. They were able to let go. And before we reached Wajir to conduct the second hearings, these women were on buses. They had put it behind and they wanted to participate in the process. So it's victim-centered because the statements were about the victims. Most of the hearings were about the victims. The recommendations are about the victims. The report that we came up with was about what happened to the victims. In fact, we had minimal participation of the adversely mentioned people on the TJRC process, but it was really victim-centered.
The role of survivors in preservation of memory, of parts of truth is very relevant, because there are the persons who are holding the information. They are the ones who have seen things, who have witnessed what happened, have witnessed atrocities. And their role is mainly to transmit this information to somebody, or to a physical form of that can be preserved.
The civil society has been providing psychosocial support. Psychosocial support is seen through counseling, psychological counseling to survivors of rape, survivors of violence, survivors of organized torture. And we've done this to ensure that we assist them to recover from the torture that they've experienced, so that they can also be reintegrated in the society.
The kind of support that my organization has been providing to victims and survivors of organized violence and torture, and will still be looking forward to provide, is the support around litigation. Because we know that in every other context that we have had this situation of trying to deal with our past, there have been some legal issues that are raised, or that have been raised, that have a direct impact on the participation of victims in these processes, especially their quest to get justice out of it. So the work that my organization has been doing over the years is to provide that capacity to the victims to be able to speak out their concerns, utilizing the legal systems that are available.
It is the duty of the different actors working with survivors to be able to enable disclosure. Speaking out is a question about disclosure. And the biggest question is, who and how can we enable disclosure? How do you facilitate people coming out? How do you facilitate people speaking? It's a journey. And survivors need to learn that that journey may be a long journey. It may be a short journey. Everyone is walking that journey as a survivor, because we suffer different violations. So these harms affect us differently.
It is therefore the encouragement that comes from organizations like the National Transitional Justice Working Group that survivors be able to organize, to empower themselves, and to be able to engage the process, no matter how imperfect, with the view that these small minimal gains have got incremental value. And when they go through a number of processes and are able to look back, you can see the progress which they would have made over the years.
Civil society also has been able to do advocacy work on behalf of survivors of violence, in order to ensure that there are policies and that are in place that will ensure that the national peace and reconciliation process is victim sensitive. So civil society has been there, continues to be there for survivors of violence.